Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan, cult expert, and yes, I wrote The Cult of Trump, and I know people are still reading it and listening to it. I read it for Simon and Schuster. It's January 14th, 2 p.m. Eastern, just to say we're in 2026 now. I was just talking with Jerry before we started just about how we're being barraged by so much BS, so many crazy things that Trump is doing to dismantle the world order and align with Russia and threaten our neighbors. But I guess I want to start with the shooting in Minnesota of Nicole Renee Good and how it's so obvious from many different people's cell phone videos that she was turning away from the officer and he wanted her to stop. And I just want to say, and I've done a video on this, Trump and JD Vance saying that officers have absolute immunity is BS, just like Trump saying we're now calling the Department of Defense the Department of War. They don't have the authority to do that. Congress does. Or change the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. But they're making these claims and they just are trying to terrorize American citizens to be compliant and self-censor. And it's showing their weakness. It's showing their cards. So I still remain hopeful that Americans have DNA, that we grew up believing in freedom of speech, peaceful protest. And depending on experts who have spent decades of their lives studying things like climate science and saying that our climate's being ruined by fossil fuels. And Trump is doing the fascist dictatorship thing of saying we're not going to keep score anymore, we're not going to keep count, we're going to get rid of any agency that's looking at the public good. We need to stay centered and grounded in our values. We need to be in real life, building community locally, but also on the internet. But really, folks, I can tell you that brainwashing by overload is one of the most common techniques that mind control cults use, because our brains can only handle a certain amount of emotionally upsetting information at any given time or any given day. And we're getting day after day after day. We've had a year of Trump and Opus Dei Heritage Foundation Project 2025. And we really need to be in control of our minds and focus on what's important. And I can just say there are a lot of really brilliant, talented people in the tech world, in media world. A lot of people are messaging on Substack. We need to pick and choose people that are trustworthy to rely on for information. And I endeavor to be one of those trustworthy sources for you because I have a long track record. People say, that I was in the Moonies. I got deprogrammed in 76. I've been doing this work for 50 years. I've written 5 books. I've created a course for clinicians, for psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and counselors. And one of my books is The Cult of Trump. And I could have expanded it, but we just re-released it last year with a forward by George Conway, who, by the way, announced he's running as a Democrat for Congress. Thanks, George. And I did an afterward, and I've been doing these messages and blogs to update as I learn new things. and I try to repost things on social media, news stories that I see. I like Associated Press. It's one of my go-to places. I like The Guardian as well because they do news that the US is not covering from another angle, from the European angle. And I don't know if you caught it, but there was an AP article yesterday saying that Pete Hegseth was announcing that Musk's Grok AI is now going to be integrated into the Pentagon. And part of the article was talking about how the world is like freaking out because they all know Musk is a bad actor, aligned with Russia and China, and has his own agenda for a network state, along with Zuckerberg and Andreessen and Bezos and Thiel and Palantir. So, but what can I say? I have declined setting up a digital ID that my Apple iPhone asked me to set up because I don't want to be in a situation like it is in China right now, an authoritarian country, where if they don't like what you're saying or doing, they can cancel you. They can shut off your bank account. They can cancel your passport. And it may be coming to us here, but I'm not going to collaborate and make it easier for them. And I don't plan to stop messaging. I plan to use my expertise to teach people what is brainwashing, how to protect your mind, how to message, how we should be reaching out to MAGA family and friends in a warm, open-ended way, asking questions. What do you think of this? Tell me, what do you think of that? As opposed to telling them what to think, or or being emotional, or calling them names, because people are leaving MAGA. It's very clear that people are not happy. And Trump is messaging which things are affordable and it's a hoax. But go shopping. You know how much more money things are costing. So you need to learn to what's called meta comment to yourself. When you hear lies from Trump or Vance or anyone from the MAGA coalition, you need to literally say to yourself, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie. Because if you don't, and you keep hearing the lie over and over and over again, the brain takes that information and the frequency and the repetition, and it acts as if it's true. And it ain't true, folks. So we need to stay self-aware and alert. There's so much more I want to say about Venezuela, about the threats to invade Denmark. I shared a piece about all the billionaires, including Lauder, who are trying to wangle a takeover of Greenland, because the world's getting divvied up for its resources by billionaires and oligarchs. And I'm still for protecting our environment. I don't want massive data centers that's going to heat the planet up faster and cause more climate catastrophe. So what do you think? I've been talking for a few minutes. Maybe we'll start answering some questions and get into unfleshing these more. I did want to add that tomorrow I'm doing a special live stream at 2 p.m. Eastern with Ann Nelson, a distinguished journalist who I've interviewed twice before about her book, The Shadow Network, about the Council for National Policy, which is the private right-wing think tank that's been working for 40 plus years to dismantle the US government, as we are experiencing. She also wrote about German resistance to Hitler. But she just published a piece about how Russia, the Netanyahu government, is messaging undue influence using VR headsets to American pastors who are part of the cult of Trump, who are already identified in my book as New Apostolic Reformation or Dominionists. So we're going to have her on to talk about this very important research and the fact that more Christians are speaking out against this. So it's very interesting. We're going to record it, but if you're around, you can ask live questions to Anne and myself. Shelley, please give a copy of the dangerous assessment that we did in 2019 to Mark Kelly in the same format that military members need done to serve, to be tabled in Congress on the public record. Shelley, I wish I had a relationship with Mark Kelly. You know, I love when my listeners say, you should be on Rachel Maddow. And I'm like, I'd love to be on Rachel Maddow, but I can't message Rachel Maddow, hey, you should have me on. You can message Rachel Maddow and say, hey, how come you haven't had Stephen Hassan on, the guy who wrote The Cult of Trump? But I wish I had those relationships. So thanks for the suggestion. But, you know, we really just, and InterX has been helping out financially last week as well. I want to thank you publicly, InterX. How do we fight against the corrosion of shared realities and do reality testing? It's a great question. So it's really about self-awareness. How much do you know yourself? How much are you aligned with the influence continuum, with your conscience, with your critical thinking, with your free will? How careful are you when you're looking at sources? Is this real or isn't it? And so, for example, because of deep fakes, videos, they can take people's voices and clone them, etc. I don't believe anything that I see on social media. I might reshare something from someone I trust, but I'm counting on them to have vetted the information. But I'm really trying to go back to AP, to known journalistic entities, and another pitch for ground.news, which is a news aggregator. And I think it's ground.news/cult expert. You can get a little discount if you're plugging, if you say that you heard about it from me. But the main thing is that it will take a story and give you many perspectives on that story, like Nicole Good's murder, right and left, what's being said. But here's the thing, we're human beings, we're embodied minds. So we have to be in our body in real time. And I recommend wearing a watch that has the day and date. I recommend really stopping from being online for hours at a time. Get up every 40 minutes, every hour, stretch your legs, look at nature, focus elsewhere, listen to music is my go-to, and dance is another go-to, because we need exercise too. And we need to hang out with friends and do fun things, you know, play ping pong, go play racquetball, basketball, pickleball, play board games. Remember those? Not digital games, but board games. I was playing with some friends. It feels so good to share meals together in real life. So you have to ask yourself, how many hours a day are you interacting with actual human beings in person? And up that is my strong recommendation. Focus Lady, question, what are some effective de-escalation strategies that can help people encountering ICE in their communities? Great question. So I think the power of, mobile phones to record actions of ICE is very important, and backing up all of this information, not just on the cloud, but to hard drives because things can get erased on the cloud. Just saying. I think being present is really important. What I think is counterproductive, and here's a thing that I'm not sure if I said clearly about when Trump said that the officer had absolute immunity. Trump later said that that Nicole and her partner disrespected the police. And from what I could tell from the cell phone video, her partner was kind of like mouthing off to ICE. I don't recommend mouthing off to people with guns anyway, even before the murder. I believe in appealing to their humanity. Yes, many of them are criminals, people who were put in jail for January 6th, but there's a lot of people who are just joining ICE for the money because they've been laid off and they're given signing bonuses. And then they're getting indoctrinated and they're getting contagion effect from other people in ICE. But the more you can appeal to people's conscience and values and ask questions like, excuse me, officer, but how would you feel if if someone was treating your mother the way you're treating me? But if you're saying it in this tone, my 2 cents is it's going to have a lot more effect than being antagonistic and calling names. That said, I think it's fine. I was part of a protest in Wellesley on Sunday. I think it's fine to have people with signs that say "Get out of ICE," get out ICE, and the government's turning fascist, and to say, to sing, "This land is my land, this land is your land," and all things like that. But we want to not give the cult of Trump excuses to escalate violence. That's really what they want. They want to blame the protesters, call them terrorists because they're criticizing the cult of Trump, so that they can harm us or arrest us or take us away. They still may do it, but I'm acting as if I have hope that enough people are going to get it together. I know I have very concrete ideas about what we should be doing, and I'm starting to wonder whether the Democrats will ever get a real leader with great messaging. So far, Pete Buttigieg is the best communicator that I've heard in the Democratic Party, and I'm hearing from some people we need a third party that isn't either or, but just against fascist dictatorship party, so that we can enlist people from both parties in the past. Michael, Venezuela seems like it was a planned removal of Maduro by the Trump administration, Moscow, China, and the Javista government in Venezuela. That's how it appears to me. And just to say, I am really a mental health professional. That's my lane. Brainwashing, hypnosis, mind control, counseling people, helping people to know how to help people to reality test and exit. But Dave Troy, who I've been a colleague with for years, reminded us that in the first Trump White House administration, Russia was trying to get Trump to take out Maduro, and trying to propose a deal. We'll take Ukraine, you take Venezuela, and China can take Taiwan. Again, divvying up the world. What's happening in Venezuela? The same corrupt government is in power. Just Maduro, who was smiling, by the way, and singing as he was arrested with his wife. The vice president and all of the cronies of that government are still running the country, and they're just making deals about American oil, I guess, and rare earth minerals. But I'm not the one to go to for information about what's happening politically in Venezuela. Really, people like Tim Snyder, people like Heather Cox Richardson. There's a number of really, really responsible journalists, Ann Nelson. By the way, I just watched a Netflix documentary on Seymour Hersh, the man who broke the My Lai massacre, called Cover Up. And it was very sobering to remember, because I remember the 70s. I was in the last draft lottery to go to Vietnam. I remember feeling the Nixon administration was so corrupt and that they were lying to us and that we were not fighting communism, and it was a big military industrial complex thing. And it just reminded me how we're in a similar thing, except with social media and the internet, etc. Things are much more extreme, but the same kind of, no, there's no affordability thing. It's a hoax by the Democrats. And it's like, wait a minute, I just paid, $100 more from my weekly grocery shops. Anyway, back to Dragon's Fire. The biggest problem I see right now is too many people are being distracted by everything that is happening and not focusing on forcing the US government out. Yes, I agree. And thank you for making that comment. I want to remind people the way the mind works is we have a very narrow bandwidth of conscious attention. We have a big unconscious that's taking in data, information from our five senses. Lots of things are going on unconsciously, but our attention is very narrow. And the mind controllers don't want us to keep talking about the Epstein files and the fact that Trump's a pedophile and has been accused and won, and victims have won, like E.G. Carroll, millions of dollars for his sexual assaults. He doesn't want us thinking of that, but I think every day, if you're activist on social media, you should be doing at least one post saying Epstein files, etc. There are some people using their AI skills to mine the myriads of data that are coming out. But we need to pick and choose. We need to look in the mirror and say, what's my lane? What am I most passionate about? And focus on that. Network with other people who share your passion. And yes, we want to still check in at least once a day with what are the news events, what do we need to know, but we don't need to know news throughout the day. And we really need to invest in our own growth as human beings. And I put heavy emphasis on the need for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep and turning off your phones an hour to 2 hours before you sleep. And I haven't mentioned this before, I don't think, on my live stream, but have you heard of a Faraday bag? Faraday. A Faraday bag. I put my phone in a Faraday bag and it blocks the phone from being on all night long. And I don't want my location tracked 24/7, and I do my best to turn off all listening devices because I don't want that either. So it's my mind, it's my body, it's my space. What can I do to control it? And yes, I do recommend Signal over WhatsApp because it's run by a nonprofit. The lawyers that run the Electronic Frontier Foundation use Signal. They recommend not using WhatsApp or Messenger or iMessage. And I use Proton Mail for end-to-end encrypted communication. And a lot of my friends and other people, what do I need it? I'm on WhatsApp. It's because Zuckerberg owns WhatsApp, and it's data is being given that you don't want given. Let's see, Michael. I absolutely love your reframing of deprogramming to reality testing. The words matter, the framing matters. Thank you. Thank you. I hated the term deprogramming from the beginning when I was deprogrammed, because my reaction was, I'm not a computer. It's not. There are elements of programming, certainly, with brainwashing, like repetition, monotony, rhythm, etc. But the key theme to what I'm teaching is that there's a dissociative disorder with people who've been radicalized. I'm using two hands. For example, the real Steve Hassan and then the Mooney Steve Hassan that got programmed to take over the real Steve Hassan, to believe Steve Hassan was satanic and his family and friends were evil. But the real me was still in there. My neuronal networks were still there. And it was only when I got deprogrammed that I could access all those memories and things. They didn't come back all at once. But all of those contradictions, they were going into the real me. But getting out isn't enough, because you have this structure that was programmed into your neuronal network. And that's why I teach people to go back in time and rewire their cult identity. This is not taught by anyone else in the world that I'm aware of. I've certainly been teaching it for a really long time. But I really believe that we need to use the power of neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. We need to reclaim all of us, including the part of us that got co-opted into a mind control cult. And for those people who are born or raised in a cult, there's a little extra work, because for me, I had 19 years of Steve Hassan and 2.5 years of the Mooney Steve. And I had family and friends and videos and photos that could help me remember and get back to who I was before the Moonies. When people who were born or raised, they say to me, Steve, I don't know who I was. I don't know what to believe. So we need to do some extra work about, okay, be in the here and now. Who do you want to be? When do you feel the most you? Is the question my mentor, Daniel Brown, a forensic psychologist, taught me to ask clients to help them orient back to the real me. The real me doesn't like to eat, cow meat or something. But in the cult, they were eating steak or eating whatever all the time. And it's like you need to get realigned with your core self. And also know we can change. We don't just want to go back. We want to evolve and keep growing. Okay, K-Clock. I've heard people suggest that Renee Good's smile and words of de-escalation, I'm not mad at you, actually triggered Jonathan Ross. He thought she was trying to control the situation. I don't know. I don't know what was going on in his head, but the ICE people, I believe, are being indoctrinated to not look at protesters as people, but to look at them as enemies. Remember Trump talking in Hegseth to the generals and the military brass, saying the enemy within? And this is a critical thing for war. If you're going to get people involved in killing and war, you have to dehumanize the other. So when I was watching the Seymour Hersh thing, and he was talking with Lieutenant Calley and other people who were there, they were all indoctrinated to look at the Vietnamese and they use slurs like gook and chink, etc. They were VC. They weren't children, babies, women, right? So you can attack me and say I'm an idealist and a humanist, but I really believe in the preciousness of each human being. I really do. And do not to others what you don't want done to us is one of the values that I was raised with, along with make the world a little better. Whatever you're doing, using food and air, etc., contribute to the greater good, Steve. And I've lived that value, and it makes me feel good to help others. I love it when people message me and say, you helped me 40 years ago. I'm married with 3 kids and I have a doctorate, or I'm an MD. I love hearing that. If our paths have crossed, even if you read one of my books or something, some interview I did helped you, let me hear from you. I'd love that. Let's see, Cami Lee, observer on Substack, says nothing anyone says justified being murder, however. Agree. Absolutely agree. Murder is murder, and that's why we need to hold them accountable. My understanding is Trump is undercutting the Minnesota teams of police that investigate police misconduct and such. They're trying to sidestep it. They're trying to propagandize about it. We need to just stay focused on supporting our leaders, people who, like the mayor of Minneapolis, I believe, gave money to Nicole's family. There were 3 kids. She's a mother of 3, and and I definitely don't subscribe to fire. You have to fight fire with fire, and they're being violent, so we need to be violent. Cancel. That's not what Steve Hassan believes or teaches at all, no matter what disinformation you may hear about me from the other side. Let's see, Perp Freak. How can we help bring awareness to the cult of capitalism? Outing greed. It's not capitalism that's evil. It's capitalism that doesn't have checks and balances, and where the corporations are treated like they're humans, and where the heads of these corporations have immunity from the harm that they're causing. Like there was a lot of laws that were put into place to not only dismantle the checks and balances, but to give a green light for more greed and more abuse. Trump has, off the charts, been demonstrating the stereotypical profile of cult leaders. Malignant narcissism. Go to my website under Learn, Undue Influence, Malignant Narcissism. Study that, because that's the profile that you never want to trust. Anything that they say or do. Anything. If something Trump says turns out to be true, that's an aberration. But you have to count on the fact that he has a documented history of abuse, of greed. And I interviewed former KGB official Yuri Shvets, who said that Trump was recruited when he first came to Russia in 1987 and came back and took out a full-page ad in the New York Times saying NATO should be disbanded. I think that's kind of a clue that Russia has influence over Trump, not to mention all this stuff since, and turning his back to our country's commitment to Ukraine. And a shout out to Zelensky and the Ukrainians, who valiantly are continuing to fight the Putin cult. Laura Cohen, call your representatives and senators, tell them cut funding to ICE, stop the terrorizing now. Agreed. And especially if you voted Republican, contact your representatives. My understanding is 17 Republicans left the block of Mike Johnson's and Trump and voted to extend health care benefits. I'm not sure what the status is, if it's actually passed and if it's gone through. But I believe there'll be more defections, or we should encourage Republicans, if they feel like they can't speak out against Trump, they should resign. You know, we need more leadership, and especially children of GOP people should be interacting with their fathers or mothers. What do I think of Sasha Riley? Not sure who Sasha Riley is, so forgive me. I don't know everything, unfortunately. I want to say Sasha Cohen, I've heard of being involved in Pennsylvania, wanting to start a sovereign community there. I think that's the right name. I'm not sure. So I want people to start their day not on their phones, but start your day being grateful to be alive. Take a walk, look out the window, listen to birds, play with your dog or cat or whatever, your children. You can get on the phone and you can get stuff later, but and when you're going to sleep at night, listen to music, take a warm bath, orient your brain to rest. We need to pace ourselves. This is a marathon we're in, not a sprint. And there's a lot of concern that there won't be free and fair elections for the midterms, that Trump has already demonstrated a history of cheating. But there's a lot of smart people who understand, the history of voting. Miles Taylor was appointed by Trump in the first election. He said that Biden won the 2020 election, and he's been attacked. But he's someone who has, I'm sure, lots of ideas about what we need to do to make sure that our elections aren't hacked. Burn the rabbit. Burn the rabbit. I don't like that one. So you have recommendations on questions you can ask our loved ones that can make them think for themselves with the situation we're currently in. I have lots of recommendations, but what is critical is the loved one. You know who they were before. So think about who they were before. So to use myself as an example, before the Moonies, I hated Nixon. I was writing poetry. I was reading 2 to 3 books a week. I was happily dating women and going out, playing basketball. I was a banquet waiter on the weekends to make money at the Holiday Inn in Hempstead, Long Island. And then I'm in the Moonies. So what could my family and friends have said to me a few months into my Mooney thing? Because they try to say, don't get involved, it's a cult. But I didn't believe I was in a cult. I felt like I was making my own decisions. But what they could have said is, hey, Steve, you have dedicated your life to learning, reading books, writing poetry. I'm curious, what was the last good book that you read? I would go, The Divine Principle, which is the Mooney Bible. Oh, interesting. So I understand the Divine Principle is the Mooney's completed testament. Okay. But tell me, what other books have you read that you really felt was stimulating? I wouldn't have an answer because I wasn't reading any books, but it would make me remember that I used to read a lot of books. So that would be one. Steve, you used to write poetry every morning, every day you would be writing. Could you share the most recent poem that you wrote? As a Moonie, I would say, I don't have time to write poetry. I'm trying to save the world. Oh, you could say. But didn't God give you your creative gift? Isn't that a way of expressing your relationship with God by writing creatively? And just be quiet after you ask a question and let the person think. They may not respond overtly, but you're planting seeds. You can always later see people try to do it in 1 hour, and they want to do a grand slam home run. It's like, get on base, get another single, get another single. Walks are fine, like, just understand the person was incrementally indoctrinated. So, but my experience is when you have rapport and trust, people will unconsciously tell you how to help them get out. You just have to really pay attention and listen. That's part of what I wrote in Freedom of Mind, my book, partly what I train families who hire me. X-Star, Neon Raven, if all our perspectives are limited by our identity, why wouldn't our understanding of psychopathy and cults not be limited too? Psychopathy is dangerous. Trumpism is dangerous. If I understand your question, I think that we can always learn more about psychopathy. I'm always open to new knowledge. I recently talked with Frank George for an upcoming podcast of mine called Cults, Culture, and Coercion. And he talked to me about how, for him, the neuroscience demonstrates that malignant narcissists are addicted with the same pathways as people are addicted to alcohol or other substances. They're addicted to their followers' adoration. And that if their followers go away, they have panic. Their supply is being disturbed and they deteriorate. It's very, very interesting. I had never heard that before. And I thanked him for teaching me that. I'm very interested in what neuroscience is teaching us because, it's the brain-mind connection that I'm fascinated with. But I'm, of course, most fascinated in understanding how people are being radicalized, especially online, unpacking and figuring out, how do we inoculate people? How do we train people to how to talk effectively? And how do we support people who've already left to feel like they're not being judged, they're not alone, and to join a larger community of ex-members? Freedom of Mind has ex-members from every possible dictatorship or cult or even a controlling wife. I recently filmed a social media post. I don't think we've posted it yet, on the topic of hypnosis. But hypnosis is a feature of being on the internet anyway. But there are people who are explicitly trained how to get people into a more suggestible state of mind in order to sell them stuff, get them to hire them for porn or OnlyFans or whatever. And I want people to know when they're being tranced out and ask themselves, who is this person? If it's a total stranger or it's an AI that is the most beautiful woman or the most handsome man you've ever seen, don't watch it. You're going to want to watch it because they're so handsome or they're so beautiful. But if you think maybe there's a bad actor. Maybe this is a Chinese bot. Maybe this is Russian. You know, do I want to subject myself to this? Is this making me feel more myself, or is this distracting me, disorienting me? It's a very important question. In a Rex super chat, thank you. Another $10. I'm so appreciative of your support. How do we deal with psychopaths that have no interest in developing empathy? How do we deal with them? If they're criminals like Trump, they should be put on trial and put in jail. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court got hacked by Leonard Leo, Opus Dei, and the Federalist Society. So until these justices are impeached by Congress, if we get a majority in Congress, or we can expand the Supreme Court and put term limits in place so it's not a lifetime appointment, which I think only makes sense to make it time limited. We're in a pickle because this has been a military planned coup, very sophisticated over decades, and people have been asleep. I know I just became really aware of it about 6, 7 years ago. I wrote the book 6 years ago. There are people who've been talking about it a lot longer than me. Let's see, Carol Lee. How does someone who is born and raised in a cult leave, understand it, and then fall back into one? Are they missing something when healing? Absolutely, they're missing something. Thank you for asking. Were you here when I was describing that brainwashing is best understood as a dissociative disorder? And I talked about the real Steve and the Mooney Steve. Well, just getting out doesn't dismantle your cult programming. And I truly believe just getting out is step one. But one needs to engage in learning. For me, I was reading books on Chinese communist brainwashing models. If you want the quickie summary, you can read my doctoral dissertation because I summarize Lifton and Singer and Shine. You can read those, but you need to do a process where a person reclaims their autonomy. What do I mean by that? I mean that we need to rewire our critical thinking. Once we've done our homework and understand the influence continuum, the bite model of authoritarian control, understand Lifton's 8 criteria, Singer's 6 conditions, etc., the critical question is, in your mind, going back to earliest memories where things were happening that you didn't agree with or didn't like, but you couldn't say anything. You couldn't act on it, whether it was being beaten with a paddle or a whip, or being told that women should only be subservient and you are a woman, or you wanted to go to college and you were told your role is to get married and have babies. You want to go back in time in your mind to hearing your mother say that or the preacher say that, etc. And you want to ask the question, if I knew then what I know now, how would I have wanted to say and act differently? And then imagine it, like play it out, where you speak and say, that's wrong. Women should have equal rights to men. I have a very smart brain. I want to go to grad school. I want to be a doctor, whatever. And it's deconstructing the cult self that's so vital. If you don't do that, what winds up happening when you're in a period of great stress, which is what's happening now, You're much more suggestible to that authoritarian voice of certainty. I know the truth. I know more than the generals, etc. And you can get lured into another cult. What I've also noticed, people get lured into other cults, but they don't stay in for a really long time because eventually they realize, yes, they were responding to something, but that was illegitimate too. But I don't think anyone should leave a mind control experience and ever let it happen to them again. Let's see. Cammy Lee is saying, Marilyn Schwartz on Substack asks, do your methods also work for someone who is in an abusive relationship? Definitely. In fact, we're working on a Substack article on one-on-one cults where one person is dominating. It's also been referred to as coercive control. Techniques used include gaslighting. But the bottom line is you need to be yourself, fully functioning as an adult. It's your mind, it's your thoughts, it's your feelings, it's your body. You need to be having an internal locus of control for your sense of self, not look outside for someone to tell you what to think or do. And this brings up another danger that I want to mention as we're wrapping up the last 10 minutes of our live stream. People are starting to interact with ChatGPT and other AIs, and they're not thinking for themselves. They're asking a large language model to tell them what to do, including like counseling ideas and stuff. Bad idea. And even when I'm hired to help somebody recover, I tell them I'm not the authority figure for who you are. You are. Think of me more as a coach or a consultant who has lots of techniques and toolbox of lots of strategies. But don't think that what I say is the last word. And if you don't agree with anything that I say, tell me. I could be wrong. I'm human. I'm fallible. And this is another thing that I want to keep sharing with people. Beware certainty. Beware certainty on any level of the political spectrum. When somebody lies and it's proven, okay, the facts are certain, but you don't need to be certain. You can say, the facts that I've seen that are credible say this and this and this and this. And until that's undone, I'm going to maintain that belief. That's cool. That's what I do. But when people tell me things about myself that I know aren't true, I can hear it. I can consider it. Is there any evidence to ground that point of view? Because I'm open to changing my mind. I'm not invested to stay the same. I'm invested in growing and learning and being my best self. Let's see. Empathy is the meaning of life. I like that. Not sure I agree entirely. It's the meaning of life, but connection with others is a big part of the meaning of life. Being part of this amazing experience of being alive. Let's see. Been a fan for over a year, pointing people to your work in socials. Thank you. I was told you are against trans individuals' rights. Please assuage my fears. Please be assuaged. My primary care doctor is a trans woman. I started seeing Roy Berkowitz. I'm not going to say the whole name. And when she said, I am transitioning to be a woman, you don't have to stay with me as your doctor, I said, why would I change? And I've interviewed people who are trans. I recently conducted an interview with a trans man who's conducting research on detransitioners. But the thing is there are detransitioners. And when I first talked about having interviewed people who thought they were born in the wrong body, some of them took hormones, some of them had surgery, and then they realized they weren't. They had gender dysmorphia or whatever. I reported that I interviewed them, and the extremists in the trans movement labeled me a transphobe, which was BS. I'm a human rights person. So all I can say is, one of the main things of being a mental health professional is do no harm. And the last thing I want is to harm anybody. And I am so totally opposed to the Trump cult administering and taking away people's rights over their own bodies, over parents' rights with their own children, over states' rights. I think this is horrible. I think it's wrong. Do I believe that if someone is thinking that they may have been born in the wrong way, do I believe that they should seek qualified counselors instead of just immediately going on hormones? Absolutely. I think there needs to be an evaluation, period, not just watching things on YouTube. I think I've said enough for this, but keep watching my Substack blogs. We're asking people $5 a month. If we can get enough volume of people, I can expand the level of work that we're doing and create more content. But if you can't afford it, it's no problem. We're doing a lot of things for free. Let's see. Camille Lee says, Megan on TikTok asks, what do you think of the organization leaving MAGA? Rich Logis is someone who read The Cult of Trump. He said when he first left, I interviewed him and we talked about collaborating and developing courses together. And then he got involved with a group that of folks, and it has a Patreon, et cetera, et cetera. And he's basically ghosted me and says that he doesn't want to portray MAGA as a cult because it's counterproductive. He wants to talk about a community. It's just a community. And I've messaged about this. I've said, I understand why the words cult of Trump and etc. It can alienate a lot of people. But in the end, to really heal and get out of MAGA, you need to learn about brainwashing, mind control, and cults. It's not enough just to have a community of other people who've left the same group that you have. So I say, good luck, Rich. Keep doing your thing. You have your lane. I have my lane. And my lane is as a authority on brainwashing, mind control, authoritarian cults, forensic expertise, because I want the law to recognize undue influence, how people's minds can get hacked scientifically and legally. So we're going to be wrapping up momentarily. I can just tell you, if you have time and want to join me tomorrow at 2 p.m. for another live stream, this time with an esteemed journalist professor, Ann Nelson. If you already are on my Substack, go to it and put Ann Nelson, A-N-N-E Nelson, and watch my previous interviews with her, and check out the documentary Bad Faith, which is based heavily on her work. And read the Washington Spectator article. Well, that's the focus of what we're going to be talking about. And I just want to say, with regarding to messaging, a lot of people in Europe and around the world are thinking all of the US has gone crazy. And I want the world to know there's the cult of Trump and MAGA, and then there's the vast majority of us who oppose it. So I'd rather the media say the Trump administration did this policy rather than the US government did this policy. I think that's wiser messaging. Likewise, when we talk tomorrow, I would prefer to refer to the Netanyahu administration in Israel versus saying the Israeli government, because half of Israel hates Netanyahu and the religious extremists, by the way, and are protesting in the streets almost daily, and we don't hear about it. So understand, I'm not against the Russian people. I'm against Putin and the oligarchy. That's a dictatorship. I'm not against the Chinese people. I'm against Xi and the authoritarian apparatus of the Communist Party. So think about it, because in the end, we're on one fragile planet. We need to figure out how to live together for the long term, for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, for all the other species who are dependent on humans. And with that, I see I've gone a minute over. Thanks to my team. And please, we're going to be sharing a former Oath Keepers interview next week on the podcast. But come and join us tomorrow for the live stream.